Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio.
Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today we have a special guest. We have Paul Bogie. He is the proud author of Heroin to Hero, a true story of his life growing up in Scotland. He is donating all his profits from the book to homelessness in the hometown of Scotland. All right, welcome to the show, Paul.
Hello, Sheila. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and I'd love to start out. Actually, I wrote a book called Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. And then we were all hit globally by the most crazy situation ever with our pandemic. So I like to start off asking if you have a time in your business or personal life that you'd like to share where you hit a rock bottom tough situation and how you got back on track.
Well, there has been many instances, Sheila. I suppose one would have been just prior to the lockdown. I was struggling with addiction. Mm-hmm. I'll explain a little bit in the podcast about that. But the power of the mind is something that's very important to me, and I suppose I'd lost my way over recent years, and I'd become depressed again. Not severely, but I was depressed. And at the beginning of lockdown, I thought I was going to be stuck in the house for 2 weeks. It's over a year now. But so that was when I began writing. And I think that for me, writing is such an important part of my recovery. Mm-hmm. And it helps me to offload things that are in my mind that maybe people may not want to sit and listen to. So I would say writing does really help me, my mental health. And I advise people every day that are struggling with depression and stuff to consider writing down how they feel. It doesn't have to be for anyone. Just offloading it from your mind onto a bit of paper can sometimes give you the release that some people need. So yeah, that's one of the instances.
Wow, yes. So that is very important. And I don't know the actual number worldwide, but many of us have difficulties or struggles with depression. And sometimes people can be going through something like a lockdown, a loss, where you feel like, am I depressed or am I just sad? And you don't even know what to call it, but life changes. And then people tend to go toward a comfort, whether it's a food or maybe they over-exercise, or maybe they get into an alcohol or a drug addiction or something to kind of deal with it. So it's finding something that's healing, like you're writing, that's a new outlet to change the situation that really makes a difference, and getting as much help as you can. And it seems like it's subtle. Like you don't even know that you've gone down the depression road, and then you notice little things like, oh, wow, I didn't really go exercise this week, or I overate, or I drank too much, or I went way too much on going out with friends and I didn't do any work. And you don't even notice until it could be a day, a month, a week, 2 years later that you realize, holy smokes, now I'm at a rock bottom. How do I rebuild this? Can this even happen?
Yeah. And it's very difficult to notice, certainly when you're living it day to day. Like you're saying there, people find it very difficult to notice or understand the difference between being sad, mm-hmm. and being heavily depressed.
Right.
You know, like people, if you wake up and you're in a bad mood or you're tearful, you know, and that was one of my signs when I knew myself that I was depressed, is that I was wanting to cry all the time. And I think if I didn't go through that physical motion of shedding tears, I probably would have continued to hide it from my family, from my friends, from everyone, and I'm just sad today. I'll be better tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm just sad today. I'll be better tomorrow, and just keep living it. And you know, the fact that I was tearful a lot, it made me understand that something's wrong. If I'm wanting to cry every single day, something is wrong, you know, and then that's when you have to start looking at your situation and how to fix it.
Right.
You know?
Yes. Yes. And it's really interesting. I know I've worked with lots of different people. Some people may be going through what they think is depression, and it's a vitamin deficiency or some kind of something is off. Now, for one of my children, I adopted 3 and have 3 of my own. One of them, actually my daughter, an incredible young girl in her 20s. I think she was 23, and she was like, I don't know what's going on. I'm tired. I feel sad. I don't know why. Well, she was working full time, 2 different jobs. She split up in the day and night shift and going to school. She never saw the sunlight. So when I said, we're going straight over to the doctor, I want all your vitamins checked, because she's never had a tendency. Now, some people have a tendency where you would know, okay, this is something since you were little, you go through these periods of depression. But for her, it was so different. And I thought, okay, and yes, her vitamin D was so low that they could have hospitalized her. She was right on the border, and I thought, wow. And she said, yeah, she's studying psychology. So she was like, I kept saying, I'm sad because I'm tired. I'm depressed because I'm tired, because physically she was exhausted. And then she was drinking so much coffee, like way too much coffee, to stay awake, because her body was so depleted of this vitamin, the sunshine. So really, it is important to go to a doctor or call the healthcare online and see if you can get a check on things, even if you are dealing with an addiction, to see if there was something else that contributed to that situation that can help you balance faster.
Yeah, definitely. And that you've got to look at all your options. And I think that's fair to say for everyone to do that's suffering, because you know, it could be vitamin D, it could be some other vitamin that you're missing that's causing you to be lethargic all the time and sad. And it could be a simple fix, or it could be something more sinister. And people have to understand they have to go and seek help. Burying your head in the sand when you feel like that, things generally are only going to get worse. Things are not going to improve any. They're just going to get worse until you hit rock bottom, and you don't want to. You know, you don't want to be rock bottom.
Right.
It's not a nice place. So.
Yes. So now I'd love to hear maybe a little bit about your story or journey. How did you actually, from starting out, get into serious drugs? And then how did you get back? What was that like when it started out? How did this happen?
So I grew up in an area that was predominantly it was alcohol that was in the area. I wasn't never much of a drinker. At the age of 18, heroin flooded into my local area. Heroin kills was what I was taught by my parents and at school. And everyone started using heroin, smoking it, chasing the dragon. And I didn't know visually what that looked like. I just seen my friends with tinfoil. And, you know, and they were sitting smoking this thing. And I began using it as well. and it stole 7 years of my life from the age of 18 to 25. And I had been on, a heroin addiction is bad enough, but I was on other drugs. I was on codeine and methadone, cannabis and diazepam.
Wow.
Just a whole concoction of different drugs
Right.
to get myself wasted.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my life for those 7 years. I'd given up on life. I'd got heavily depressed to the point I became suicidal. And at first, I was just thinking about suicide, never actually contemplating ever doing it. And like I just mentioned there about burying my head in the sand, I continued to bury my head in the sand. I was crying every day. And then I started to plan how I was going to commit suicide and stuff. Fortunately, I'm here talking to you right now.
Yes.
So I've just passed my anniversary on the 14th of May. I'm 17 years off heroin.
Beautiful.
So basically, after my heroin addiction, I attended a course about the mind, Sheila.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing to do with addiction, just solely on the power of the mind. And I applied what I learned on that course to my addiction.
Wow.
And stopped like that. Said no more, and I stopped, and it was instant. I'd relapsed 13 times before, and I knew something was different. So after I started to get better, I'd lost a lot of weight. I looked like death, and I started to dream and plan a future that I never believed I had. I got a job again. I started to put weight on. I started to look better. I started running like Forrest Gump all over Edinburgh and Scotland, everywhere.
Oh.
Just ran everywhere with the music in my ears. Then I felt like there was still something missing. I wanted to do something, so I decided on joining the army.
Wow.
I was 30 years old. I was one of the oldest guardsmen to ever join the regiment, which is the Scots Guards, standing outside Buckingham Palace with my red tunic, bare skin, and my rifle, guarding the Queen. And, go to Windsor Castle, Tower of London, St James's Palace, and working and, standing outside these places, having a few years prior being suicidal and a heroin addict, and being able to change my life in such a dramatic way was amazing. It is an amazing turnaround. I didn't really feel that way at the time, Sheila.
Yeah.
It was just my life. It was just my mind. I can achieve anything I want to if I put my mind to it.
Yeah.
So I chose to go and be a soldier. And I chose to change my life for the better. Then, unfortunately, I was medically discharged from the Scots Guards in 2015. I was in a serious car accident. I wasn't driving. I broke my back and I crushed my spine.
Oh, wow.
So I was left no longer able to be a soldier. And no surprise, the doctors put me back on opiate medication.
Oh, no.
Tramadol, dihydrocodeines, cocodamol, and the addictive personality that I have. It was only a matter of time before I started abusing my prescription medications. Started smoking cannabis, and that was where the cycle of depression that I spoke about at the start. This is where this came about. That I was a drug addict again. After all those years and sorting my life and joining the army and everything was amazing, traveling the world and stuff. And then I'm back in Edinburgh back in Scotland, a drug addict.
Wow.
And I started to wallow in my own self-pity, feeling really sorry for myself, and that just caused my depression to get worse. And then I had a breakdown about 1.5 years ago. Things just weren't right. Then I know this pandemic has been really bad for everyone.
Yeah.
But I would never have wrote this book if it wasn't for the pandemic. So I choose, to think about this pandemic in a positive way. There isn't many ways people can, because it is a horrible experience. But I would never have wrote that book if it hadn't been for the pandemic. And when I was writing the book, I was writing about how I broke my heroin addiction, and I applied it to my life a little over 1 year ago, and said, well, look, if you can stop heroin the way that you're writing about in your book, why don't you try and apply that to your life right now? Because things are not right with you now. You don't feel, you're sad. Why are you sad? Ask yourself the question, why are you sad? And yeah, because I'm on all these prescription tablets from the doctor, and I feel like a zombie. Right. Well, can you do anything about it? So, as I sit here in front of you now with my crushed spine and physical pain, I am over 1 year drug-free.
Wow.
No drugs whatsoever. And I love it. I absolutely love it. It was a dream to me. These spinal specialists and doctors, army doctors, Paul, you're going to be on drugs for the rest of your life.
Wow.
The sooner you accept that, the better you'll get on. And I accepted it, Sheila. I'm so angry that I did accept it back then. I believed that I needed these tablets to function, for it to be my life. And now to be over 1 year completely drug-free with the same injuries. Yeah, it's hard, physical pain. Of course it's hard, but it's just an amazing place to be now. So I published the book, give all the money to homelessness in Scotland. I've already been out travelling across Scotland, meeting the homeless people, giving them sleeping bags, socks, boots, tents, scarves, gloves, food, and just going out. And I'm on a new mission in life now to help people. But where my passion lies is addiction. That's where I feel that I've got the most expertise in life. I was only homeless for a very brief spell. But I have suffered with a lot of addiction problems in my life, and now that I have managed to work out in my mind exactly what was going on and exactly what is going on now, I'm choosing to give back to society. And this is the reason why, when I seen your show on the thing, I thought, my story is not for just Scotland. It's not just for the UK. There's addiction problems all across the globe. And if people can just see someone like me that was a heroin addict turn their life round and go on to join the army and become an author, become happy, and it's an important message that people that are struggling right now understand that just because they are addicts right now, or sad right now, or suicidal right now, there can be a light at the end of the tunnel for everyone.
Yes.
And it's just that's what I hope to be, is just a beacon of light for some people. Hopefully people listen to you or listen to us, and things that I'm saying maybe strike a chord and think, well, do you know what? If this Scottish guy across the pond can turn his life round, then yeah, maybe I can do the same. and it is an important message to put out there. So this is why I thank you very much for having me on.
Definitely. Thank you. It is such an important message. And I actually wrote an entire chapter in my book about breaking free from addictions. And it's something that raising children and just growing up in my life, I was homeless as a kid for 3 years and all this. So I got to see all kinds of situations out there, lost friends and loved ones due to addictions over the years. And so it's one of my passions to help people get back on track and be able to find the help that they need and ask for help when they need it. And give them as many resources and stories like yours. So there's hope. Sometimes you just need to hear, oh my gosh, he could do it. I could do this too. And I'm not alone. And I think you feel really lonely when you're going through something like this. You tend to isolate just to hide your situation. So it's one of those things that asking for help when you need it is going to make all the difference, and you're not alone. For anyone listening in now, do you have any maybe advice for parents, family members, loved ones listening in that maybe see somebody in their family or neighbor, somebody they care about, that you kind of know there's a situation, an addiction, maybe you don't know what they're doing or why or how serious it is, but you see a change in their personality? What would you suggest as a way to help family members get back on track, or to let them know you're there? What would you suggest?
Yeah, and that's one of the most difficult things, is for family members looking in helpless. Mm-hmm. They are helpless, or yeah. They feel helpless, and that is because the person who has started to use drugs mm-hmm. or alcohol, they've sort of went into themselves into this depression, and they're using the drug and alcohol as a crutch, yeah, to make them feel better. In the short term, anyway, it works. That's why there are so many drug addicts across the globe, because they work mm-hmm. in the short term. The problem is, of course, when you continue to use things, the body adjusts and becomes addicted to whatever drug it is. But for the parents, I would just say not to give up. I think that it has to come from within the person, mm-hmm. change. And that's something that I speak about every day with people over in the UK that see my story and they want to know. They say, Paul, how 17 years off? How, my son's the same place as you are. How can I help them? And I always say, just don't give up. And it's like, it's a mental health problem. Mm-hmm. It's not a physical problem, addiction. It's more mental health. It's a mental problem. And there is help. There is help out there. But what I found from my experience was, when I was seeking help, no disrespect to the drug counsellors, right? But if they had read it in a textbook, yeah, about how I'm feeling, about mm-hmm. cold turkey, about heroin use, right. And they fully admitted that they had no experience of taking heroin or anything. Mm-hmm. So my mind automatically would disengage. So I would say to parents or anyone who knows of someone struggling with addiction, it does have to come from within them. But the best people to help are those that have been through it, mm-hmm. and they've come out the other end. Yep. The people that can understand what the person is actually going through. Because mm-hmm. when people spoke to me about being clean of heroin, I loved it. I loved listening to their story. I loved, I was a heroin addict at that time. And I thought, wow, this person's not dead. Right. They've had a heroin addiction and they're now a drug counsellor helping me. And I just thought it was amazing. And that really planted a seed in my mind. What, you know, that it's not necessarily over just because you're a drug addict.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are so many things that we can do to help ourselves. Ultimately, we have to help ourselves.
Yeah.
Because without that,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it's not going to work. There has to be that, there has to be something inside that really, you know, you're tired of being an addict. There's a lot of shame involved, not just for yourself, but obviously for your family and your friends and your community, people looking down on you. But you can turn it around.
Mm-hmm.
That's more a message to the addicts, any addicts listening, but certainly for family members and stuff, I would say seek help from people with lived experience. That's going to be the best chance of your loved one pulling through.
Mm-hmm. And I know in the families that I've experienced and talked to and seen just with my own kids, their friends, and people that have gone through these situations, my friends growing up being homeless, I saw these things. There's the family this is what tends to happen a lot, is you'll have maybe a sibling or somebody knows and they hide it to help the person, to protect them. So it's like there's a lot of quiet hush hush. Nobody wants to come out with it, and it doesn't really protect the person. And some people in the family may not even know the person has an addiction problem. Maybe they think, oh, maybe they just drank too much. That's why they're not around. They're sleeping it off, but they don't realize how severe the addiction has become because so many people cover up to protect their loved one. What advice do you have for that? What could be done for family members that, so that they're on the same page to help?
Yeah, I think it's such a common occurrence that addicts hide. Why? Because we're ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're ashamed and we're embarrassed that we've become addicted. And so you hide it from your family as much as you can.
Yeah.
You know, and then when certain family members find out, you plead with them to keep it a secret.
Mm-hmm.
And you promise that you will get help and you will fix yourself. And then you realize how difficult that actually is, and then it continues. I think that the best thing that you can do is be honest.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. That is hard for addicts.
Yeah.
Being honest, it is hard. But you have to own up to your problems, and the sooner you can catch it,
Mm-hmm.
before the physical problems from addiction start to happen. You know, your skin starts to deteriorate.
Mm-hmm.
You lose weight. Your bones, your liver, your kidneys, your teeth, everything starts to deteriorate when you're taking drugs or alcohol. So you really want to catch these problems. You know, you don't want to be waiting 2 or 3 years. If you've got someone in your family that you love and you're thinking, you know what, I think they've got an alcohol problem because they're drinking every day. Sometimes they're drinking to the point they can't walk or talk properly. You know, chances are they've become addicted to the drug. And you have to sort of confront them. And that's difficult. It's difficult for family members to confront people, certainly when they're drunk. I would suggest wait until people are straight before saying it to it. And the likelihood is it's not going to be met very well.
Mm-hmm.
But what it will do is it will plant a seed in that person's mind that I've not got a drink problem. I've not got a drug problem. But because your mum or your brother or your sister's told you, look, you're doing this and you're behaving this way and you've changed, you're losing weight and stuff, then you're going to start questioning, maybe I have.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I have. I don't want to tell anyone, but to myself,
Mm-hmm.
I think I have got a problem and I'm going to keep trying to hide it. I think just planting that seed, and then and we can only hope. We can only hope for all the addicts all across the world. You know, the truth is, the vast majority don't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that the people that do want to hear it, it could change their lives. And it's being honest, not to everybody else, just be honest to ourselves. That's where your recovery starts, is by being honest to ourselves. Because without that, everything's fake.
Yeah.
Fake smile, fake laugh. You know, like, how are you? Yeah, I'm great. How are you? You know, and everything's all fake. And when things are not great, you know, seeking help, like we spoke about, seeking help is the most important thing. And we can't do that until we're honest with ourselves. We can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, there are signs to look for when somebody is addicted, and maybe they're covering up really well, but they will. I mean, I've had people that I've seen that they'll say they're going to go to work and they won't show up, or they'll leave early. They'll flake out, let's just say, and then they won't be consistent, but they're consistent in their inconsistency, where you can look at their, I don't know, work record. Let's say if they're working with you, and you could say, wait a minute, they leave late, they leave early, they show up late, they come and go, and then they're okay and they're fine and nice. And other times they don't want to talk. And sometimes their eyes don't look quite right, but you know, it's one of those things, and they're nice, and you would never know except for the patterns. There's certain patterns where they can't keep commitments because they went and had a binge or whatever. And so then they come back and you're like, wait a minute, you said you were going to go out to lunch with me yesterday. What happened? And then you said you were coming to work at 10 to help out, and you didn't show up 3 times. And the stories, you'll get stories, lots of cover up stories, and they make less and less sense because they're stories. And so those are signs that someone, it may not be someone that's in your family, but someone that works with you, for you, or a neighbor, friend, just anybody you know. These little signs are like big notices that to notice them and to actually be present and have a talk and help, not condemn, but it's like a cry for help. And it's not intentional. It's the drugs, it's the addiction. It's not that person. Who you are without drugs is not the same person as when you're in an addiction situation. It's not you at all. And so to remember that and be able to help people, and sometimes to give the consequence. I will help you, but I can't give you this responsibility. You can't be around power tools because I'm concerned, or whatever it is. And that's something, and it's hard to do, but it's the best thing to do, because it actually is a little bit of a wake-up call to the person. Like you said, it's that seed that's like, okay, something's going on, and they don't hate me. They're here for me, and they're going to help me when I'm ready. So that's really important to look for, and it's subtle.
Yeah, the thing that you mentioned there that I remember when I first got my job was the mood. And this was a strange thing. Certainly with drugs like heroin and crack and these drugs that are hard to source. Not like alcohol. You can go into the supermarket and you can buy a bottle of vodka, you know, and it's quite an easy, accessible, legal drug.
Right.
Just as destructive, but it's legal. But I remember there was a whole lot of anxiety when I was working with my addiction. I worked full time, and you know, I was always anxious. I was always aggressive. I was quite snappy with my mood.
Yep.
And that was because I didn't know if I was going to be able to source heroin that day. And it was difficult. But when I did source my drugs, I became the happiest guy you would ever have seen in your life. You know, I worked in a supermarket, and I would go up and have a laugh and a joke with all the customers, and I would just be a brilliant laugh. And it's like my moods were like that every single day. Points where I was so low, and then there was no middle ground. I was so low, then I sourced my drugs. Everything was all good. I was happy, and then boom, I was ecstatically happy. And you know, that's when you can. These are subtle things that you can notice. If somebody's mood's very, very low, and then a few hours later, you notice a massive increase, you know, and it's not subtle, you know, and they become overly happy. You know, there is a chance that there's maybe addiction problems there. Possibly. I'm not saying, you know, I'm not saying go accusing everybody that's like that off that, but certainly that's one thing to look out for, is these fluctuating moods. Is one thing that could be a telltale sign that there's addiction problems there.
Yes. Now, I was really fortunate. I was homeless from 10 and a half to 13 and a half. And the first day out with the kids on the streets, one girl overdosed and was in the hospital. Another little boy passed away. And they had offered me drugs. I didn't know how to inhale. I was so lucky. I literally didn't know how to smoke. And I was like, no, I'm okay. I'll just watch you. And I kind of watched and went away. And then they were going, you know, tripping basically on this drug. And I didn't know what to do. And I was trying to help them. And some police officer comes by because my friend's out cold and the other boy is having a seizure. And that was, for me, a saving grace, because that was my first experience seeing this whole world. And I was so young. The parents of the girl, I went to the hospital and they made me stay by her side. I didn't know her other than that day. I had barely met her. And the mother was like, you're going to stay right here, whether it's your fault. And I was like, my fault? I didn't even have anything. But it was enough for me to say, whoa, I never want to go down that road, because I saw the other side of it. And I just, in the United States, and I'm sure you have your own numbers, there's over 70,000 people, mostly young people, that we lose, pass away every year just from the drug addictions from overdose. And so this is a serious, and it's such a serious worldwide. The numbers must be insane. I don't have those numbers, but my heart goes out to, you know, these are young people. I was 10 and a half exposed to all this for other situations. You know, my parents couldn't care for me. My mother said, go. So where was I going to go? And, you know, this is what happens. And so in a way I was protected because I saw that, but it just breaks my heart to see these things happen. And I'm sure you've experienced somebody you knew in your area that you lost or had an overdose or whatever. It's really scary and serious. So to listen and look for the signs, be available, have numbers. Now in the United States, we have 211. And you can Google 211 in any state or province in Canada, and you can get help for addiction, abuse, and recovery, and at least or suicide prevention. We talked about that, and they kind of go hand in hand a lot of times. And so those are really important. And I don't know if you have, I'm sure there's different resources where you are in Scotland as well. Yeah, it's really important.
As a true pandemic, Sheila, this drug problems. Scotland has the highest drug deaths in Europe.
Wow.
And it's rising.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in some meetings over the last few weeks and months with some members of Parliament, and things have to change.
Yeah.
You know, the stats are telling us things are not getting better; they're getting worse. You know, So if we don't try and change it, then things are just going to continue, and the numbers unfortunately are going to rise. So we can only keep our fingers crossed that something is done. And I think it's important for people like you and I, by sharing our stories, we're playing our part in trying to help the situation. You know, by doing this podcast right now, we are playing a small part in trying to change people's mindsets of not just about for the addict, but also for what people think about, what society think about addicts. Because in this country, addicts get spat on and get stomped on and get told, you know, pretty nasty things, and they're not welcome anywhere in society because they're an addict. And that's how, I'm sure in the States it'll be the same. You get treated that way when you go into a supermarket. People are looking at you. Security guards going to follow you everywhere, probably throw you out. You know, and it's just a horrible way to be. So I think big changes have to happen worldwide, not just in Scotland and the UK, but worldwide. We have to certainly at least try and change things.
Yes, and I think it's sort of, we hope our governments and those in charge help and create programs, but also this grassroots efforts, like you said, having this show, your book, hearing about a way to get back on track when you're actually dealing with an addiction and how you got back on track. These are really helpful and important. So I am so glad that you came on the show and are sharing about your book. Could you share one more time for the listeners your book, and then how people can connect with you and get the book?
So my book is currently, wait a minute. So my book is currently on Amazon, both paperback and ebook. Like we said earlier, all the profits from the book go to homelessness in Scotland. I'm also on all platforms on social media. So I have Facebook. I have a Heroin to Hero page on Facebook as well. I have Instagram. I have Twitter. I have TikTok, and I also have YouTube. So if you type in my name, which is Paul Bogey, on any of the social media platforms, my name will come up. And some of the profile pictures, it's like that. But if you look at the content, generally it's around the book and helping people with addiction. I do lots of videos on social media, on Facebook especially. I've done over 1,000 hours on Facebook, going quite into depth about how I broke my addiction, in the hope that people can listen to the way that I done it. I've had people breaking addictions since I started at the start of lockdown. I've had people that are right now that have come off all their drugs. You know, and it's through listening to what I was doing on Facebook. So for any of your listeners across the pond, I'm more than happy. My Facebook's public, so you will find me. Send me a friend request, join me on Facebook, and tune into some of my videos. If you want to hear a Scottish guy, I do try speak more properly when I'm like speaking to you, Sheila, because obviously your listeners are across the pond. So I generally do speak a lot with a lot of slang, like as we do in Scotland. Hopefully I've not been too bad tonight and your listeners can understand what I've said. But I'm on all social media. So yeah, and the book is on Amazon, which again, I've sold copies East Coast to West Coast in the States. I've done a podcast in Florida. I've done 3 podcasts in New York, and then I've now got you to add as well. So you know, it's amazing. I love it. So yeah, please support me.
All right, thank you so much, Paul. And for those tuning in, we'll be back after these messages. All right, stay tuned. Of work patterns. I'd like to introduce you to Adam, and he's going to share more about work patterns. All right, welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks, Sheila. Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself, I guess.
Yes. And so I'd love to hear about how work patterns was created.
Sure. Yeah. The idea around work patterns came about, from my point of view anyway, having struggled with the problem myself at a previous company, where I was part of starting a company at a very early stage. And at that point, we were 3 people, and then we grew to 700 people over the years. And obviously, as that happens, there's a lot more complexity that comes in. Operating the business becomes more challenging. There are miscommunications, information flow that needs to happen. You have new people joining and people leaving, and management becomes really difficult. Managers have needs of their team in mind, and they often have their own work that they're trying to get done. And it's a very complicated job. And I just found that there weren't a lot of tools designed specifically to help managers be great managers, try to keep track of everything across their team in one place. And so that was really the idea around work patterns. And yeah, as you alluded to, we start with that weekly one-on-one meeting, and we help provide a collaborative agenda for that helps managers and their direct reports keep track of action items and things of that nature. Also, some of the more high value activities like giving and receiving feedback and recognition and goal setting. So yeah, kind of everything a manager needs in one toolkit.
That sounds incredible, and something that is very needed. Now, at what point would a business really look into a system like this?
Anytime there is we think about it as a unit of at least 5 or 10 people. So from the beginning days of starting work patterns, we used our own product to help manage the operations of the company. Anytime a manager is managing 4 to 5 people, that's when the informal systems kind of fall apart. And you need to be a little bit more intentional and thoughtful about how you're keeping track of each employee, what your commitments to them are and what their commitments to you are, and making sure you have good open communication. And so that's really where we step in. That kind of one manager and 4 or 5 direct reports. That can obviously be in a much larger organization. I think of it as a team unit.
Yes, and I work with a lot of smaller businesses that are at that point where they need something like what you have to offer with your program, because they're working so hard trying to manage everybody, and then they forget recognition. Communication goes away. People are upset because it's not clear what they're supposed to do or the prioritization. Right. And this is where there's so much stress, and then the talent gets wasted on trying to manage this type of situation instead of everybody using their talents to make the business grow more and just have work be a fun place again. So it's not the managers that benefit, it's actually all the employees. Everybody on the team is grateful when something like this shows up where they don't have to approach a manager because things weren't clear.
That's right. Yeah, we actually see a lot of times that it's not always the managers that start using work patterns inside an organization. It's the people who are kind of, quote unquote, managing up and want, and kind of it's a way to say, hey, this is how I want to be managed, because I want to know what is expected of me. I want to make sure that I'm getting feedback on a regular cadence so I can improve. And then once a manager sees that, it's like, oh, this would be a much easier way to manage all of the people across my team and have that consistency and not have to try to remember, oh, did I do this with this person? What did I say I was going to do with that person? All that in one place. So you don't have that, like you said, that just stress and mental overhead that just sucks the energy and life out of you as a manager.
I remember I had 5 gift stores years ago, and I ran them for 17 years. This was before programs like yours showed up, and I spent hours every week working with the team, and I had lists and everything was on paper. I'd love to have this. I had to have extra managers to help and lots of meetings to actually get things done and make sure that we're great. I mean, I had over 200 employees, 5 retail stores that were 5,000 plus square feet. And it was a lot of work. When you have new people coming on board, how do they make this transition?
We answer that in sort of the pulling off of your story, where the evolution of this space has kind of gone from paper, like a lot of this was kept track in paper notes, and obviously paper notes that relies on you to go back to check on them. Then the next evolution was sort of what I'd call like horizontal software solutions. So something like a Google Doc or something like that. That's not really purpose built for the specific use case. It's just it's a way to make that paper digital, but it's not purpose built for people management or a specific use case like that. And now we think we're kind of in the third generation where we want purpose-built tools for the specific job that we're trying to do. And in this case, people management allows us to think through these cases that you mentioned. Like if you have a new employee joining the team, what template should you use to onboard that person? What are the things that you should be talking about early on? Why we offer templates in the product. So we have kind of like an onboarding template.
I can only imagine there must be some type of studies or idea of the change that happens when somebody first onboards with your program and maybe a few months into it, once they get things up and running. What are the differences that people share with you? What are they finding with this program?
There was obviously a pivotal point that we all saw back in March of 2020 when all of a sudden every company basically went to a hybrid or remote working arrangement. Big thing that we saw, that the informal systems that people were using for people management that weren't so great even then, totally fell apart. And an example of that would be like, oh, I don't need a one-on-one because I can just drop by someone's desk when there's something to talk about, or I'll just bump into them in the hall or something like that. So that'd be an informal way of handling it. And those serendipitous encounters are great, but they should never have been relied upon as the basis of the relationship. The employee manager relationship is the fundamental building block of any organization. What we're seeing in our space is similar to what many industries are seeing, in that it's sort of like pulling the future forward. Companies are realizing that if they have more intentional systems and are more thoughtful about adding the right amount of structure, right? You don't want a whole lot of bureaucracy and red tape and things like that. But if you have the right amount of structure, if you're documenting things, if you're getting reminders or setting up reminders for things, it takes a lot of the stress out of and a lot of the chaos out of operating. And that allows us to then have this more hybrid arrangement where, we can have our synchronous time where we're spending it together and aligning on things. And then that gives us flexibility to be remote or work different hours or whatever, work when we're more productive.
Well, and I think you're able to see workflow better. So, sometimes managers tend to give everything to one and not enough to another. And so this kind of helps, I would imagine, balancing workflow and getting some feedback on what needs to change, maybe on the team side, if something isn't working out, why. So you can find out, and you have a trail of what's happening so that if anything needs correction, you can go back to that. And
totally. Yeah.
That's where you can reward people on the team and also make adjustments needed to make it easier. That's great. That's incredible. Well, thank you for sharing. And for those tuning in, we'll be back after these messages. All right, stay tuned. If you are just tuning in, this is Sheila Mack, host of NBC's Sheila Mack Show here on KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind. And today I have a special gift for beautiful, authentic you. For a free Boots meditation and mini introduction to the Boots formula course, go to www.sheilamac.com/Boots meditation. That's www.SheilamaC.com/Boots, BOOTS meditation, and enjoy your free gift, which is a free Boots meditation class, as well as a mini introduction to the Boots formula course. Enjoy. To grab a copy of my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. It is now available on Audible, as well as on Amazon and Kindle, and at www.sheilamac.com.